Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Actuary Podcast. I'm your host, Brock Tulby, the Fantasy Football Actuary. Welcome into the weekend. Welcome into week one of the playoffs. We are getting extremely close to Christmas. It is almost the holidays. I have one more week of work until I am off for Christmas. So hopefully you are in a similar situation where you're getting close to having some time off and time with your family and just time to relax overall. I know this last week of work is going to be a challenge. It's going to be hard for me to push through, but hopefully I can do it. And hopefully I have some round one wins to kind of propel me through the week. As with every other Saturday episode, we will start with the Thursday night throwback. There is two main points for this Thursday night. The first, I recommended staying away from Cam Newton for your playoffs in the Tuesday episode. He was my nose diving quarterback. Despite his 25-point outing in week 13, I said, do not trust Cam Newton in your fantasy playoffs. He only threw for 69 passing yards last week. He threw for under 100 yards again Thursday night, and he only scored 4 fantasy points. This is why I said stay away from Cam Newton. If he does not get those rushing touchdowns, he is going to be a huge detriment to your team. He's averaging under 100 passing yards in his last 3 games, and he's only thrown for 5 passing touchdowns on the entire season. Banking on his rushing touchdown games is not what you want to be doing in your playoffs. I have Cam in my Reality Sports Online league. It is a 2 quarterback league, and I did not even think for a second of putting Cam in my lineup at all, and I'm not going to for the rest of the playoffs. However long I'm in it, I am riding with Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehill. That's the league I had Dak in, and I lost him, so I did have to start Cam a couple times because of buys, but for the most part, it's been Cousins and Tannehill, and that's who I'm sticking with in the playoffs. Cam is not even a consideration for me, and hopefully he wasn't a consideration for you. Hopefully you listened on Tuesday and Cam was out of there. The other big point is also Cam, but it is Cam Akers. He is finally a thing, apparently. So after waiting nearly all season for the Rams to finally turn over the reins to Cam Akers, we got our wish. He had 29 carries, over 170 rushing yards, and he had another 25 receiving yards. No touchdowns, but that is still a fantastic 20-point effort for anybody who was ballsy enough to play him. My models had him ranked at RB13 in standard, um, but I can totally understand if you did not have the bravery to play him this week. He's really only had 1 week of getting the majority of the work, which was last week. That was his first week. He got like 60% of the snaps. He had a majority of the carries, but that was the first week all season that Cam Akers had been the lead rushing work leader for the Rams. So I can totally understand not risking that in your fantasy playoffs in round one. But my models did have him at RB13. I do own Cam Akers in my Reality Sports Online league. It is a half point PPR league, so I think in half point I had him down a little lower, like 18 or 19. I did not play him. I even with Antonio Gibson going down in that league, I ended up playing Kenyon Drake over Cam Akers to fill in for Antonio Gibson. I don't regret the decision. I think Kenyon Drake is definitely a safer option, and we will talk about him a little later. But Cam Akers looks like he might be a league winner. He's got the New York Jets coming up next week, and then Seattle in championship week. So if the Rams keep giving him this kind of carry volume and this snap percentage share, then he's going to do good things for you in weeks 15 and 16 as well. It's just I don't know if you can trust Sean McVay to actually do that. Hopefully, it's painfully obvious to everyone, including people that just watch the game. Hopefully, it's painfully obvious to the coaching staff that Cam Akers is their best running back. And if they give him the ball, good things happen. So we will have to see. But if you are in a pinch, like I am in some of my leagues with running back injuries and COVID, and you have Cam Akers as like your fourth string running back, he could actually come in and fill in. And I think he's going to be a running back too going forward through the championships. With that, we will jump into the NFL newsstand. The first news here is obviously going to be COVID related. I think the biggest COVID injuries are David Johnson first. He was placed on the COVID IR list yesterday on Friday. He didn't practice Thursday, and the interim coach, Kremel, came out and said that David Johnson might not be available on Sunday due to personal issues. It turns out those personal issues are COVID related because he is now on the COVID IR list. So a week after coming off of the normal IR for his concussion, he's back on for the COVID, and this is rough. I have David Johnson in two of my leagues. I have him in the 10 team standard ESPN league where I slipped into the playoffs as the sixth seed, and I was counting on David Johnson. I also have Josh Jacobs in that league. So, Josh Jacobs or David Johnson, if neither of them play, I am going to end up flexing someone that's very sketchy. So hopefully, Josh Jacobs can end up playing. But I was banking on David Johnson, and he is out now. And then my 12 team Superflex League, David Johnson. I have David Johnson, Antonio Gibson, and Josh Jacobs. So all three of those guys are up in the air. I thought I had a crazy strong running back core because I also have Derrick Henry in that league. So I thought I was cruising into the playoffs. Luckily, I did get the first round bye in that league. So if you've listened to past episodes of me explaining how the league works, we get 1 point for winning our matchup, and then we get 1 point for being in the top half of scoring in the league. I got I was in the top half of scoring 11 weeks out of the 13. So I was in the top six, 11 weeks out of the 13, and I was the high point scorer. Despite not having the best record, like matchup wise, I ended up with the second tied for the second best record in overall, including those high point weeks because I had 11, which was two more than anybody else in the league. And then because I was the high point scorer, the tiebreaker is points. So I got the first round bye. I thought I was going to miss out on it last week because of Antonio Gibson's injury, but the way the Tuesday night game played out, I ended up hanging on to that sixth overall scoring spot in the league for week 13, which put me in a tie with this other guy, and I ended up getting the bye. So that is great news because with David Johnson on COVID, with Josh Jacobs dealing with an injury, with Antonio Gibson dealing with turf toe, my once strong running back core is hurting in that league. So hopefully we can take an extra week and get healthy. And hopefully I at least get two of those three guys back to go with Derrick Henry for week 15. The other big COVID player out is DJ Moore. He remains on the COVID IR list and he's not expected to play Sunday, but Curtis Samuel was activated off the COVID list. So with Christian McCaffrey doubtful, Curtis Samuel is definitely viable with DJ Moore out. Robbie Anderson's obviously a start. If Curtis Samuel had missed, I think Mike Davis would have been a better option. He was more involved in the passing game his first few weeks, filling in for Christian McCaffrey. But then when Curtis Samuel became a thing, Mike Davis kind of got relegated to just rushing down work, and it really hurt his fantasy value. So if Curtis Samuel had been out, I think Mike Davis would have been a good play with Curtis Samuel back. I don't think Mike Davis is as great of a play. You can still start him for sure. He's a starting running back. But I think Curtis Samuel is a pretty good play, and Robbie Anderson is obviously a start with DJ Moore out. Other news, Packers head coach Matt LaFleur said that Allen Lazard will not be put on the field for 60 snaps this coming week, which suggests that Lazard is still on a bit of a snap count as he recovers from his core muscle surgery. He's a risky flyer in a desperate flex kind of situation. I would not trust Allen Lazard. Sounds like he's still recovering from surgery. Sounds like he's on a snap count. He definitely has the possibility to catch 2 or 3 passes and 2 of them go for touchdowns. But I would not bank on playing Allen Lazard in my first round. I like playing safer options, especially in the playoffs. And we will dive right into the injury update now. Like I said, my running back core is suffering across multiple leagues. So we will start there. Ezekiel Elliott is questionable with a calf injury, but he doesn't seem to be in any real danger of missing. And he said himself that he doesn't expect to be slowed down by this at all. I have Ezekiel Elliott in my 10-team standard league. So it's Zeke, Josh Jacobs, Ronald Jones, and David Johnson. Those are my 4 running backs, with Josh Jacobs injured, David Johnson on IR, and Zeke questionable. Ronald Jones is my only healthy running back right now. Luckily, in that league, a couple weeks ago, I was able to pick up Tony Pollard as a handcuff to Zeke. So if Zeke does miss, I do have Pollard. And then Josh Jacobs is questionable. This is better than we thought at the beginning of the week. It sounded like he was just going to be out. And then he was able to turn in limited practices both Thursday and Friday. So if you have Josh Jacobs, if he was your first or second round pick and you're in the playoffs, you are praying that Josh Jacobs is back. Even though it is a tough matchup against Indy, they do have their full defensive line is back healthy now. So it's a tough matchup. It's not the same defensive line that Derrick Henry ran all over a couple weeks ago when they were dealing with COVID and injuries. But Josh Jacobs is obviously a danger to get multi touchdowns every week. So if you see Josh Jacobs on your opponent's side, you're always worried, oh, it's going to be that multi touchdown week. He's going to score 25 points. So yeah, you obviously play Josh Jacobs if he is out there. Antonio Gibson is out as expected with turf toe. This is no surprise. He's probably going to be out next week too. I wouldn't be surprised if he is out through week 16 and you don't get to play him the rest of your fantasy playoffs, which sucks for me because I have him in my Reality Sports League and my 12-team Superflex League. Christian McCaffrey, as I said earlier, is doubtful for the week, so he will not be out there. Anybody who is lucky enough to make the playoffs after drafting him first overall, you are mad because he is not available again. I don't know if we'll see him the rest of the season. It's not like the Panthers are really competing this year. He doesn't really have any incentive to come back. This this quad injury is different than his other injuries that he's been dealing with. So I could see that this quad injury keeps him out for the rest of the year, even if it's not that serious, just because why put your body through that? Why put your highest paid star through the last couple weeks of the season and risk serious injury when you're not really competing for anything this year anyways? Keke Coutee is listed as questionable, but he practiced fully Thursday and Friday, so I don't think there's any doubt of his status this week, and hopefully he's good to go. He is one of the guys I picked up, and he would be one of my flex consideration options if Josh Jacobs and David Johnson were both to miss, which David Johnson's already out. So if Josh Jacobs misses, Keke Coutee is one of my flex options for round one of the playoffs, and I do not feel very good about it. I mean, he was good last week, but he actually he was third in snaps for wide receivers on the Texans team. So he was super involved. He had 9 targets, but I mean, just historically looking at Coutee's career, I don't know if you can feel good about just starting him in your playoffs after one good game. It's kind of like Cam Akers last week. One good game. Do you want to risk that in your playoffs? I might be forced into it. And Coutee's teammate Brandon Cooks is also listed as questionable, but he is likely to play. Kenny Golladay is out again. I report this every single week. Kenny Golladay is just perpetually out with a hip injury. So Marvin Jones remains a very viable option. I think he can be good. I think Matthew Stafford can have a good game against the Packers. It's an in-division rivalry, so it's always competitive. I expect Marvin Jones and Matthew Stafford to look more like last week as opposed to the couple weeks before that where they were terrible. DeAndre Swift, also on the Lions, is questionable again due to illness, but he was a full participant at Friday's practice. So if he's back out there, he probably slots in as an RB2. Hopefully the side effects of his concussion are completely gone and he is back to his normal self. Frank Gore is questionable, but expected to suit up. So any Ty Johnson speculative ads can now be dropped. He is on nobody's radar if Frank Gore is playing. Savon Ahmed is out for week 14, so Myles Gaskin remains the guy in Miami, and I think he is a solid start for round one of your playoffs. He's probably an RB2. He's the only guy in town, and he's been pretty good as the starter for Miami. Todd Gurley does not have an injuries designation this week, but I really hope that you are not relying on Todd Gurley for round one of your playoffs. The last few weeks have shown you that he's injured, first off, and then he's not very good on top of that. He made his money in the middle parts of the season based on touchdowns. He was averaging an abysmal yards per carry. He was very inefficient with all of the carries he was getting. He did not have any explosive plays. He was just touchdown dependent. He was getting the touchdowns. And I don't know if that's what you want to bank on in the playoffs. If you have no better options, I guess you can flex Todd Gurley and pray that he gets 2 touchdowns like he did for that stretch of 5 games in the middle of the season. But all in all, I don't want to start Todd Gurley in my playoffs, and I hope that you have better options. Gurley's teammate, on the other hand, Julio Jones, is out for week 14. So this just means that Matt Ryan should be started in nobody's lineups for the playoffs. Don't trust Matt Ryan, and obviously you're without Julio Jones. If you drafted Julio Jones, your team has probably been hurting this whole season. There's a lot of first round picks like that going around. Christian McCaffrey, Saquon, Michael Thomas, Julio Jones. If you drafted those guys in the first round, chances are you're probably not in the playoffs anyways. And that will conclude the news segment and the injury update. So we will move into the Saturday episode's main segment. It is Fringe Player Frenzy. I am going to talk about a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end who I think is on the fringe of start consideration. Someone who is usually ranked a little lower, or someone who people have as their backup at that position, but someone who I think you should start this week, and I'm going to explain why. So my fringe play at quarterback is Kirk Cousins. He has been a stud, but there's no way anybody drafted Kirk Cousins to be their starting quarterback at the beginning of the season. He was obviously picked up as a backup or a bye week fill-in, or he might be even available on waivers in some of your leagues. But Kirk Cousins is my fringe play start at quarterback. My models have Cousins ranked as a top 10 quarterback this week, and I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be there. He's been on absolute fire the last month. He has 3 passing touchdowns in 4 of his last 5 games. He has over 300 passing yards in 3 straight games. And he's throwing to Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Justin Jefferson is my favorite player in the NFL right now. I am a little biased. I love Jefferson. I have him in multiple leagues. I was able to grab him off waivers. And he's a stud. I love watching him play. He's so good. And Adam Thielen has consistently been one of the best wideouts in the league. So Kirk Cousins is throwing to those 2 guys. I don't know how you can go wrong. He also has Dalvin Cook to dump passes off to. Dalvin Cook can get chunk plays, just like always, which is more passing yards for Kirk Cousins. The Bucks, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who the Vikings are playing this week, they've been bleeding points to fantasy QBs recently. They're the 3rd worst in the last 4 weeks. So over the last month, they're the 3rd worst. They're giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And Cousins should dominate for the 6th straight game, and he's an easy top 10 play in my models. I would start Kirk Cousins over Kyler Murray this week. I totally understand if you don't have the stomach to do that. If you are the Kyler Murray owner, you've probably been doing pretty well this season. He might have even gotten you to a first round bye, so this wouldn't even be a consideration. But Kyler is obviously banged up. He hasn't been, the last few games, he's had less than 5 rushing attempts, which is not how he made his money in the middle of the season. He made a lot of fantasy points because he was rushing a lot. If he's not doing that, and he's got a hurt shoulder, which is limiting his throwing options, he can't open up the field to DeAndre Hopkins. He's throwing short passes. He's not rushing. I think Kirk Cousins is a better play this week than Kyler Murray. He's a safer play for sure. But I totally understand if you don't have the stomach to do that. If you're in the playoffs because of Kyler, I can respect sticking with Kyler. I just think, and my models back it up, that Cousins is a better play than Kyler this week. I would also start Cousins over Justin Herbert and Derek Carr this week. So I am high on Cousins, and he's passed the eye test the last few weeks. He's been really, really good. My fringe play at running back is Kenyon Drake. So he may have slipped to a flex option on your team throughout the course of the season, like he has on my own team in Reality Sports Online. I thought Kenyon Drake was going to be one of my starting running backs the entire season. That did not pan out. He got injured. He was splitting time with Chase Edmonds. He was ineffective before his injury. And then with the emergence of James Robinson and Antonio Gibson, and then Kareem Hunt was tearing it up. So I just didn't need Kenyon Drake. He had been on my bench for a pretty long time. I can see that happening in a lot of leagues where Drake was injured. He was ineffective before that, and you just found better options. But I think that Kenyon Drake and my models think as well that he is a low end running back one against the Giants this week. And the Giants have allowed the seventh most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So it is a plus matchup. And Kenyon Drake has been getting pretty good work. He only got 10 carries last week because of poor game script in the second half for the Cardinals. But with those 10 carries, he was able to go for 49 rushing yards and a touchdown. So 4.9 yards per carry. That's pretty solid. And then 2 weeks ago, back in week 12, he did receive 22 carries. So the volume should definitely trend more towards 22 carries this week, as the Giants may be without starting quarterback Daniel Jones. And you would expect that the Giants aren't going to blow out the Cardinals, even if the Giants have been more competitive. Just look what they did against Seattle last week. But I don't expect them to be in any kind of super huge lead against the Cardinals. They're not that good of a team. So it should be competitive, or the Cardinals should be up a majority of the game. So I would expect, closer to the 22 carries for Kenyon Drake this week. I'm playing Kenyon Drake over Kareem Hunt in my own league this week. So even Antonio Gibson is out. So I had to choose. David Montgomery he was locked and loaded last week for me. He's in again. And then I have James Robinson. I'm going to play James Robinson the whole playoffs, even if his matchups are bad, because he's just been so good. So my third spot would have been Antonio Gibson. But with Gibson out, I have to choose between Drake or Kareem Hunt this week. So I'm going Drake over Kareem Hunt in my own league. And I would play Drake over Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week. He is a running back one in my models, and I like him. My fringe play at wide receiver is Brandon Aiyuk. I'm seeing a lot of analysts fade Aiyuk this week. I'm assuming it's because of the tough matchup against Washington. They have a really good front seven. They put a lot of pressure on. They're good against the pass. But Aiyuk has scored a touchdown in 3 straight games that he's played. And in those games, he has 10, 14, and 9 targets. The 9 targets, it is worth noting that was the first game where him and Debo were both healthy and both played together. So in that game, he did get 9 targets, even though Debo is presumably the wide receiver one. But when they both played a complete game, he still got 9 targets. He's targeted enough. He's used in the red zone. This past week, you saw, even though Debo was back, Aiyuk was the one to get the red zone target and the touchdown. So I think in the red zone, Aiyuk is probably a bigger, more reliable target than Debo. And he's probably going to get those red zone targets on a more reliable basis. And then he has the game-breaking big playability that gives you huge upside on a weekly basis for your fantasy lineup. So I would keep riding with Aiyuk. I would not fade him this week, as I see some analysts are doing, having him ranked in the high 20s or low 30s. I don't think he is anywhere close to that low. My models like him near a wide receiver one, a fringe wide receiver one play. And I would start him over Michael Thomas, Amari Cooper, and Chris Godwin this week. And finally, my fringe play at tight end is Logan Thomas. This segment is all about finding fringe plays that you might have picked up on waivers in the middle of the season, or someone that you might have picked up this week, and someone that you're kind of wondering, should I start them? Should I not start them? So Logan Thomas is my guy at tight end this week, and he's probably still available on your waiver wire. He came out against the Steelers and exploded for 98 yards and a touchdown in what was definitely his best game of the season, and he should be able to carry that momentum going forward into your fantasy playoffs. If you've been streaming tight ends this season, I think Logan Thomas is a solid option this week. Despite the 49ers' tough defense against tight ends, they have a top 10 tight end against defense. They've only allowed 3 touchdowns to tight ends. So I can see looking at the matchup and being scared, but Thomas got 9 targets this last week, and he's consistently been getting 5 or 6 targets since Washington's week 8 bye. So the targets are there. I think he's becoming more trusted for Alex Smith, and I think he's a good fringe tight end. Now, my models aren't starting him as a top 5 tight end this week, so he's not top 5 at his position or anything. He's not ranked as a super stud locked in tight end, but he is a fringe play tight end, and he's ranked in the top 10 for my models, and could definitely be a play for anybody in a pinch dealing with any type of tight end injury, or if you were streaming tight ends all season long and it hasn't worked out for you, Logan Thomas is there, and he's probably available on a lot of leagues' waiver wires. I would start Logan Thomas over Eric Ebron, Noah Fant, and Jonnu Smith. So if you're starting that tier of tight end, I would go Logan Thomas this week. Just to recap, my fringe place starts. My start at quarterback is Kirk Cousins. My start at running back is Kenyon Drake. My start at wide receiver is Brandon Ayuk. And my start at tight end is Logan Thomas. If you want to check out my full model rankings for anyone that I didn't talk about this week, as I said, my models had Cam Akers ranked RB13 on the weekend standard. So I feel like I'm working out the kinks in my models are getting pretty good. Obviously, through the course of the off season and next year, and models are always an evolving type of thing. If you've worked with any kind of prediction models in the past, you know that they're always changing, they're always being updated. You need to take new things into consideration. So I'm always working to make my models more accurate. So hopefully they are reliable for you. You can check out the full model rankings for free on the website, thefantasyfootballactuary.com. I have non-PPR, half point PPR, full PPR, and I have flex rankings on there. That is all for free on the website. If you want to watch video versions of this podcast, this episode, or any future episodes, you can go to the YouTube channel. It is The Fantasy Football Actuary. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It definitely helps my reach. It will help the channel grow. It'll help the podcast grow. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it is at the FF Actuary. So that will conclude this week 14, the playoffs, round 1. It will conclude this Saturday episode. Hopefully you are in a good spot. Hopefully you are feeling confident going into the playoffs. And we'll be back here on Tuesday, and I will let you know how I did. Like I said, I have the first round bye in my 12-team Superflex League, so I am competing in round 1 of my other 2 leagues, and hopefully it goes well. So I'll be back on Tuesday. Enjoy Sunday. Enjoy. Hopefully you're getting close to the holiday, so hopefully you have some holiday fun planned this weekend. I know I am baking Christmas cookies. So enjoy your weekend. Enjoy football. I'll be back here on Tuesday. And until then, keep crunching those numbers.